I always like to reframe the conversation of your best results are not going to be numerical here. They're going to be people that come to the donor conversation being like, I already understand it and I already love your mission. They're going to be the people who feel like you probably have this, Christian. There are probably people that are like, yeah, Christian's like my buddy. He's like my friend, who don't actually know you, because that's what podcasts do to those parasocial relationships. Those are the wins we want.
Welcome to another episode of The Profitable Creative, the only place on the interwebs where you will learn how to turn your passion into profit. I am your host, Christian Brim. Special shout out to our one listener in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't, but I try. It seems like I pick the hardest names or maybe that's just where people live that listen to the show, is in towns with difficult names. Anyway, thank you for listening. Joining me today, Jake Doberenz with Theophany. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Let's start with Theophany. What that sounds like a Greek word, maybe.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Theophany is a Greek word, also a theological term. It means appearance of God. You have that word theo in there.
Okay.
It's when the divine shows up, which is usually weird. Burning bushes and things of that nature. Pillars of fire in the sky. Those are theophanies. When the divine shows up on earth, usually in ways that are strange or odd, but maybe slightly more comprehensible to us than, divinity just showing up.
I love that. So why did you pick that name?
Originally Theophany Media was my catch-all company for all my zany, crazy projects. And a lot of those were religious in nature, not exclusively, but I wanted to communicate these kind of timely truths and things like that. From the, at first I was doing plays, I was doing fiction writing, I was doing nonfiction, and what kind of all summed it up, not everything was explicitly religious, but there was sort of this thread of I'm taking these divine things and helping them show up. And some of that's weird and wild. Humor is a big part of my communicative strategy and all my various creative art forms. So it just seemed to fit, Theophany. And then I realized later, not everybody can pronounce that very well. Hey, it's stuck now. I have the domain name, theophanymedia.com. Not selling that anytime soon. So there you go. Here we are.
Okay, so my next question is, how do you make money with that?
Yeah, so over the past 6 years, it's changed. At first, we were primarily the ones who were putting out our sponsored content. We had a podcast, the Creatively Christian podcast, went for 3 or 4 years. Before that was sold off and turned into some other things. We had some other projects and stuff. So we were the content creators. We were selling our content. We had some memberships and things for a while. There was also things you could buy. That is a way to make money. And then over the last, really the last year and a half or so, it became less about not getting away from that, but more helping other people start their things. And we narrowed it on podcasts because in the podcast field, there's a lot of people saying stuff, but if you have a little bit of knowledge and experience, you're probably you are just better than the person that's never done podcasting before. And the rule of thumb that I always heard is when somebody asks you 3 questions on how do I do this? How do I do this? That might be your business idea. So it became enough people saying, how do you do the podcasting thing? You've done that for 5-6 years. How do you do that? So it became more of what makes money now is, hey, I'm going to help you create your podcast. And more specifically, we work with those religious organizations, nonprofits, mission-driven kind of people help them do that, whether that's we do it all or we come alongside you and consult depending on budget and needs and things of that nature.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that when people ask you three things, that's a brilliant insight.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hadn't really ever considered that. So to clarify, your customers primarily are nonprofit in nature.
Yeah. Or money is not the number one goal of their business.
Okay.
Profit is not the number one goal of some of these businesses, although they would like to make that in some way, shape, or form. There's a passion behind it. There's a mission, right? There's a story. There's a transformation they want to have happen.
Yeah, I find that segment very interesting. I've been doing this 29 years, and over the years we've done work with nonprofits in various capacities, various segments, and for me, it's always posed a challenge because their paradigm is different, and it goes into the way they make decisions. And it's not a right or wrong. It's just distinctly different, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of people that are in the for-profit sector look at the nonprofit kind of down their nose of like, well, that's not a real business. And I think that's the wrong question, because it's not a business. It is an enterprise. It has the appearance of a business. It does some of the things that a business does. But the intent in the organization is distinctly different. So I guess my question to you is, have you noticed that paradigm being different, and how do you adapt to that? How do you do business with that?
Yeah, definitely a different paradigm, but that it both attracts me to them and makes me question why did I pick this segment. Constantly, that's the battle in my head. But I love people that are doing something, and I'm sure a lot of your audience is in the same boat here, where we would like to make a living, but we want to do something that we're passionate about. We want to do something that makes the world a little better. I love working with those people, as you probably do too, Christian. So I'm attracted to that. I think it's awesome that we're dealing with people that are just thrilled about making the world a better place, and they can do that through all these different things. But yeah, specifically that nonprofit model just makes decisions differently. Money, not across the board. There are nonprofits doing great, but largely speaking, a lot of nonprofits are they got a real tight budget. When they get a grant coming in or something, often that grant is for XYZ, and that is it. A lot of times, little extra projects or something like that, they just don't have money for that. Operations are really tight. Different things like that. They're constantly having to fundraise and do different kind of events and things like that. So working with them is interesting because a lot of times they come to me and say, I've heard about this podcasting thing, or I like that podcasting thing. What does that take to do? And then when we start talking numbers, they can get very scared, or at least they kind of realize, ooh, that's not in our budget. That's not what I thought it would be. And I tell people all the time that podcasting technically could be almost free. Like really, truly, we could maybe $100. Like we could get it something out there on an RSS feed, real cheap, real easy. But to like do it right, to do it sustainably, to get an audience from it, which is most of our goals, well, there's some investment. If not in money, usually it's money, but if not in money, incredible time, effort, investment. And so having those conversations can be really interesting because they don't often have the people on staff to do that. They're already stretched thin. Barbara over here in this office is wearing 4 hats in different kinds of roles. But then the alternative would be to hire out, and then that's a line of their budget that they just don't have room for. So I think I got away from your original question.
No, I
but
think
this is the things we have to wrestle with. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. I think the thing that is foundationally different in a for-profit and a non-for-profit is the nonprofit ostensibly is working from a fixed pie, right? There is a fixed amount of resource, be it time or money. But I wonder if, as you were talking, I'm kind of reflecting on that, and I'm wondering if it has to be that way, or if that's just the way their mindset is. For instance, like if there was a way to produce value for them that cost them money and or time, but it furthered their mission, their goals, be that direct impact or awareness or fundraising, like, it could show up in a lot of different ways. Getting them to think in terms outside of a scarcity mindset. Like
Yes.
if this is what you're really about, then it will further your goal, then why not do it?
Right. And those are the conversations I have constantly, is reframing the objective. I was talking with one nonprofit not long ago who already has a podcast, and they're talking about the numbers that the board wants to see. The board wants to see download numbers and mostly numbers. And I always like to reframe the conversation of your best results are not going to be numerical here. They're going to be people that come to the donor conversation being like, I already understand it and I already love your mission. They're going to be the people who feel like you probably have this, Christian. There are probably people that are like, yeah, Christian's like my buddy. He's like my friend, who don't actually know you, because that's what podcasts do to those parasocial relationships. Those are the wins we want. A lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizations in general have really complex things. Some places can say, I sell X, great. A lot of organizations, well, I kind of do this so that we can do that. And this podcasts are way better to have those conversations. That kind of storytelling doesn't show up on a social media post. You see on Instagram and you see a nice little image and then you scroll past. Even a little 60-second TikTok video, you can't explain those hard things. Podcasts are way better for that. People show up and they're going to spend 30, 45 minutes with you a week, maybe, if you have a weekly schedule. That's just unmatched. The average American spends more time with podcasts than on TikTok or anything else like that. This is where you really truly get attention. So yeah, it's constantly reframing those conversations. And oftentimes, the executive director or whatever is like, I'm on board, but then I have to convince the board of directors. I have to convince the trustees or the stakeholders or whatever. And then we go back and forth for like 9 months until we get anything done. Super fun industry. But that's the nature of the beast.
That's the other dynamic is most nonprofits in some capacity have volunteer shareholders, if you will. Either it's the board or trustees or deacons, whatever. Sure. And they're not engaged in the nonprofit like the paid person is, the paid professional, the person that's in it every day. And that also is an interesting dynamic because it is kind of a layered sales process where ultimately the stakeholder doesn't really understand the problem. Like they have a different perspective. Does that track with your experience?
That's often true. All dynamics are always different. There are some where they're like, we trust the executive director. We are putting our trust in them. Awesome. Other times, not necessarily a lack of trust. It's just a skepticism, or again, it becomes we just see numbers, and numbers are important. You're in the accounting world, you know that, but there are other things at play here, and sometimes there is a failure to imagine kind of a long-term solution, because podcasting is the long game. You don't see success in episode 3.
Right.
Maybe you do, which is awesome. But in general, we're 50, 600 episodes. Like, it is the long game before you really start to be like, oh, that's why I did this crazy thing for all those episodes. Now I'm seeing it. Now it's paying off in however you define paying off for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I get irritated as a business owner when marketers, both internal and external, say, well, this is a long-term game, whether that's podcasting or SEO or content. That seems to be the universal excuse marketers use. Not that it's not a true statement, but my perception is that it's often used as an excuse for lack of performance, because it's kind of like, well, you're not really going to see the results for 2 years, and I may not be here in 2 years. So I'm pretty okay making that commitment. But it doesn't remove the fact that there are long-term plays, right? That if done correctly do have a cumulative effect. I just think a lot of people are there's a lack of trust with marketers when they say those things, because it's been abused. So it would seem to me, with your customers and your business, that there is, if you were able to directly tie your efforts to something tangible like fundraising, that's probably an easier sell than something more ethereal like awareness of what you do or the impact that you make. Is that the case? Hey, listeners, are you ready to turn your passion into profit? Then grab a copy of Profit First for Creatives. Click the link in the show notes to purchase a copy. And if you're not ready to make that full commitment, you can download a free copy of the first chapter. Check it out right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to talk about if I'm investing $1,000, I'm going to get $2,000 back or something like that. And it all just depends on what kind of podcast you're trying to create. I think one failure that a lot of podcasters do outside of nonprofit is we want to have the do everything podcast. Generally, I find you got to stick with one. Are you a podcast to raise fundraising? Yeah, then we can talk about what does that need to look like, and then we can talk about that. Or are you community awareness? Do you want to just talk about what your event is next week or something like that? Well, that's going to do a different thing. So there are cases where we can talk about, you want to make money off of your podcast? You want to get donors? Well, here's how we need to position this. And sometimes it's not even the podcast itself. A really interesting strategy I have seen and have encouraged is to have your donor on the podcast. Why did you donate to us? And they start to feel good. They start to tell their story. Other donors can get involved with that. Maybe you squeeze a couple more, $1,000 out of them or whatever, because they just like you more. That is a strategy to have the clients on. This is a popular strategy for, you want to turn them into a client, or you want to somebody who already is a donor or a client. You want to butter them up. Sounds bad, but it's not. It's not out of this place of tricking them. It's, I want to thank you for what you've done for this, and I want to share your story. And so and so donor. Maybe they own the local roofing business and they can get a chance to talk about that, and we all win here. Right. There are 50 different strategies to do with the podcast. And a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizations, a lot of podcasters haven't even thought about the different things they can do. But every day I just am constantly saying, it depends on what you want your goal to be, and then we work backwards. Is what I'm doing all day, every day. And that goal probably shouldn't be download numbers. It could maybe be fundraising, but there's all these sorts of other goals you can shoot for, and then we'll work backwards and create the thing that lets you achieve that.
Hey creatives, Delana Ely here. I had a question for you. If you could pay yourself more, why aren't you doing it? For real. S Corp is an option for you, the creative entrepreneur, to move your business to the next level, to pay yourself more, and to cut your tax savings down. Yeah, less money to the IRS. We want that, right? So why haven't you done it yet? What's going on? The reality is you probably have 50,000 questions in your brain. You don't know which way is up and down, and you're still too busy to do all those things, plus also create, right? Well, the good thing for you is that Core Group is actually the place to be to get that S Corp election rolling. Yeah, we have an assessment. Let's see if you qualify. Come chat with me. Core Group, turning passion into profit.
I'm coming up on 2 years with the Profitable Creative. And when I started it, I had no idea what I don't say no idea. I had published my book in 2024, and I had gone on some podcasts to promote the book with audiences that I thought it would resonate, and they were lovely podcasts. But the shows and or the hosts weren't asking the questions and having the conversation that I wanted, right? Mm-hmm. Which I didn't have any strategic intent about it. It was like, I want to talk about these ideas that are in the book. So I started the podcast, wasn't even a podcast listener. So I was starting from maybe a basement level. I wasn't even a ground level. Mm. And over the last 2 years, I've started to think about, okay, what you're investing time and money in this. What do you want out of it? I've got some interesting feedback from listeners and some of them clients, and there's this struggle I'm in the middle of. Like, okay, should there be more tactical, practical advice in the show, either from the guests or from myself, versus these maybe higher level conversations that are more strategic in nature, more mindset in nature. And I'm kind of struggling with that, but I go back to the question of, who am I making this for? Right. Like, yes. Who, but as a podcaster, it's oftentimes difficult because you don't know who's listening. And the feedback loops are not good.
Right. We're not there yet with analytics. Absolutely. Podcasting is fun, but there's all sorts of gaps in everybody's knowledge. And I guess at some point at the end of the day, you just have to pick, who do you want to listen, rather than who does listen. And then I just tailor all my content for that. I do so much on my main show, the podcast I host. I do so much statistical analysis of what titles are performing well, and I get into the numbers and the things, and I quickly learn this resonates with people. And I get pitched a lot by authors with new books, and I can look at their book and say, that looks like a great book. My audience won't eat that up. They're not on board with that. It doesn't check off the boxes. So I say, you're not my guest. Love you, but see you later. We can start to make those decisions through little kind of metrics, but also at the end of the day, I just decided this is who I'm going to tell all my guests. This is who you're talking to. This is who I'm talking to. And people will self-select in or out of that over time, I think.
So who are your listeners for your podcast?
Yeah, so my personal podcast, Christianity Without Compromise, are Christians who maybe don't have a home in some of the different labels and things like that of either whether that's a label of an actual church denomination or conservative versus progressive and things. So there's some spiritually homelessness there, which is it's funny because there isn't a label. It's really hard to market that because it's like, there's not like a word I can use necessarily. But there are people who love the church and want to also say there's some things wrong here. So each episode starts with here's what's wrong. We're diagnosing a problem in the church, and then we're moving outside of that. We're moving to a positive at the end. Here's how we could do things differently. Here's how we should frame things differently. So it's different than like a typical Christian devotional or Bible study podcast. It's not a here's how to get closer to Jesus. It's here's a problem we're going to poke at, and then we're going to look at a better way to do it. And that is exactly what resonates. The titles that perform the best, the episodes that perform the best, do exactly that formula. And when I stray from that, less people listen and care. It's not about the guest. I've had very famous people on. If it doesn't work on the formula, it doesn't work.
So the Christian homeless, spiritually homeless, okay. How does that work into your business if it does?
Yeah, it's been a constant struggle. I told you at the beginning the origin story of Theophany Media. Theophany Media is supposed to be my playground for my content, stuff I wanted to put out. Mm-hmm. If I had my way, I'd release I'd have 10 different podcasts that I was in charge of. Not sustainable, turns out. And so in one sense, the company now is my profit engine to support my living and existence, but also ideally my future crazy projects and schemes and things like that. My podcast that I just mentioned earlier is purposely not profitable. I am not trying to make money off that. I have a different goal. And I'm comfortable sharing that. That goal is I want to earn a traditional publishing contract. I want to build an audience and be associated with the right type of guests so that I can get a traditional publisher and I can have people willing and ready to endorse me and say, Jake is cool. I like what he's saying. Because I have friends in that industry, in that space. I'm not the biggest voice, but I have a voice in that space. That is my goal, and that's what that's doing. So it is sort of under the Theophany Media is the production. Theophany does the production side of things. It's a podcast that also allows me to experiment and tell people, here's what not to do. Oh, and here's what to do that I have learned that you might benefit for your show. But that's my baby. That's my project. That again is an example of a show we have produced because we have produced it. That can be in our marketing material to say, here's the things that we have done. But it's a little bit more for me where the production company side of thing is a service for everybody else. It's for other people. But they feed into each other, of course. Yeah.
I'm kind of reading between the lines. What I heard you say is that this podcast, its intent is to build a community. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, a community. Obviously, I want listeners, and then secondarily, I want the guests. I want to befriend them. I want to connect with them. Yes.
Okay. Which I think, to be honest with you, is one of the most powerful things we can do in this age, this digital now AI age, where community largely is lacking. People feel disconnected, but that's across the board. So whether it's nonprofit or for profit, I would say that would be what maybe my overall intent is, to create a community of like-minded creative professionals that are interested in building a business, as opposed to talking about, the technical aspects or the creative aspects of their business, and or financial or tax tips and tricks. That's not what this show's about, right?
Sure.
It's about building a group of like-minded folks, although it is asynchronous. It's one way. I'm not necessarily getting feedback. The listeners aren't necessarily that I know communicating with each other, but like your goal of getting published, once you have that community, and that could be a podcast listenership, that could be an email list, it could be
correct, yes,
like your LinkedIn network, wherever that community resides. Then you have the ability to engage it further, but you got to build it first.
Yes. Which is just the thing that just takes effort. You can pay your way to shortcuts, and I do recommend that. There are certain, do some ads to get to your podcast, whatever. That's good, fine. Maybe we should do that, but then it's just effort over time, But when you build a community, that's valuable. One of the weirdest ways I have ever made money is several years ago when Facebook groups on Facebook were like actually a thing Facebook liked and cared about and were a little more useful maybe. There was like a Super Bowl commercial for Facebook groups. Like that was the thing they were pushing. I built a Christian authors Facebook group. I don't know. We had like 4,000 members after a while. And I sold that. I wasn't doing anything with it. I sold it to somebody who wanted to be in front of Christian authors who had courses and books and things to sell. They bought that from me because a community is valuable. And I'm not doing that with my podcast community, although I have sold another podcast that I mentioned earlier. But communities are incredibly valuable. People that listen to you and speak to you. Of course, you don't want to just all of a sudden turn into some weird brand ambassador where you lose that trust and authenticity that people came to you in the first place. But there's all sorts of value just in having people that listen to you. It's weird that people listen to me. It's strange. Last year I started sneaking in solo episodes into my podcast feed. I had always done interviews. A lot of the people tell you you got to do interview podcasts. A lot of people assume that's what just a podcast is. But I started sneaking in some solo episodes, just me talking for 20, 30 minutes. Some of those are my most popular episodes. I'm like, why are you listening to me? Like, I'm just a guy with some thoughts and stuff. But apparently people resonate with some of the things I have to say. They like my approach to things. They like my storytelling and my little bit of humor I try to sneak in there too. Like, that is valuable. Now, we can use that power for evil, which I'm not going to. Against that kind of thing. I try to use that for good, but there's lots of good that can be done when you have a platform of some sort.
Yeah, I think I've recorded 2 solo episodes, and for a lot of the same reasons. I'm like, who wants to listen to me talk? But yes, they have outperformed. They're above the average. And so then I have to ask myself, why am I not doing more of it? Right. I am going to ask you a tactical question since you asked since you brought up the subject, what situation makes sense for a podcaster to pay to promote their show? Is there long-term lift to that? And I have one data point. I bought an ad on, I don't even remember what platform, about 18 months ago, saw a spike. What was interesting to me was it appeared that people went deeper. So like if I look at the spots that I paid for versus the downloads, it seemed like people were consuming not just the episode I promoted, but additional episodes. But I didn't see any, as soon as I turned the ad off, the listenership was not impacted, but that was a one-off. So what my question is, when does it make sense to promote your podcast on a paid platform?
Yeah. I mean, paying for marketing or some kind of paid promotion is always going to be a little quicker than just hustling out there doing it yourself. But you're right. There are certain times where that might be a nice little spike and then that goes away. I think for somebody, and actually we're in very similar spots with our podcast where we're like nearing this 2-year point. And and this is the time where maybe things start to slow down, not necessarily plateau, but you're doing it for a while. At that 2-year mark, typically at 100 episode mark, that's where things start ticking up, generally speaking. And so I like to promote at certain times where you are feeling that little plateau. Give yourself a little bit of a lift, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I recommend, though, is to remember that 2/3 of Americans are podcast listeners, but a third of all Americans is like a monthly listener. They'll listen to something every now and then, and then the other third of the pod. I'm getting my math mixed up. Yeah, the third of Americans. Another third listens to podcasts weekly. They're the ones you want to target, the people that are actually listening to podcasts. And the best way to target a podcast listener is to be on some kind of podcasting app, to have some kind of ad on another podcast or guest on another podcast, or you can there's a couple podcast platforms that allow you to put an ad on them. So while somebody's looking at their podcast platform, they're seeing an ad to another podcast. Those ads, I think, typically perform better because you're automatically saying, I'm talking to podcasters, people who are into the podcasting things. So I typically recommend that. Is there like a right time? I don't know. There are more ad agencies and things in the podcast space that I've seen been promising subscribers, which is interesting because, as you know, we can't exactly tell how many subscribers we have.
Mm-hmm.
Apple doesn't just freely give that up, kind of thing. I mean, there's some things you can do in the back end. And there's some of the hosts will estimate how many actual people follow your show and get that new notification every time. But I'm seeing a lot more podcasting ad agencies saying, we can guarantee you subscribers. We're not guaranteeing you listens. We're guaranteeing you people are going to come back and again and again. Those are pretty pennies, but that's interesting to me, at least on that ad front there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I have interviewed several folks like yourself recently, because it seems like there's a growth in not just podcasting, but then the agencies that serve them,
Sure.
Whether that's helping them produce it or promote it or be discovered, which is kind of an interesting trend. But to your point you made a while ago, it's long form content that you can't get any other way. I mean, there's no substitute.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could do long YouTube videos, but even then you're cutting yourself off from a huge amount of people that are going to want to listen on their run or on their drive or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why you've seen, YouTube push so hard into the podcasting. And then Apple opening up video. It's kind of like it's like they're trying to get in on the game, but I question whether that's not just cannibalizing. I don't know that I don't know that that's necessarily new users, but I don't really know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's still an audio first medium as far as I'm concerned. I throw my video out there, but I'm an audio first creator. That's what I care about most. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a face for radio, so that's why I chose this medium. I did not, what's interesting, I had Connor Quinn on the show. He is an OG voice actor. And if you go look him up, his image is nowhere. It's not on his website. It's not on his LinkedIn profile. And he specifically requested, although we did record video, not to use video in promoting the episode. And I didn't ask him specifically about it, but I think in his line of work, being a voice actor, you've all seen the Bart Simpson voice actor, all the voice actors, they never look like what you think they would look like listening to their
Sure.
voice. And so there's that kind of like intentional disconnect between the two. I just find that an interesting point.
Yeah. Power of audio. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you have to use your imagination.
Ooh.
Yes.
Wonder what people think I look like. Who knows?
Well, people that have only listened to me will be extremely disappointed when they. I actually had somebody tell me this week, like I had a powerful resting bitch face, and they said it as a positive, like it was they intended it as a compliment. Yeah, and I'm like,
Okay.
I don't know how I should take that.
Okay.
Although I'm fine with it because that keeps random people from coming up and striking conversations. So,
well, when you're in the South, people definitely do that. So
yeah, I mean, randomly, and it's like, what made you think that I wanted to have this conversation? I don't. So
exactly.
The resting bitch face does come in handy. Jake, how do people find out more about your podcast, about Theophany, if they want to learn more?
Yeah, we got theophanymedia.com, but I am just all over LinkedIn these days. That is just where I am showing up talking about podcasting. So follow me on LinkedIn. I love new connections and stuff. I try to personally send out a message to everybody that connects with me and stuff. Like, let's strike up a conversation. Let's get to know each other. Make social media a little more social sometimes, maybe. And crazy idea. But I'm posting there probably too much. I don't know if there's a too much, but I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I host obviously my own podcast and things. And for the podcasting space, I have the Podcasting for Good newsletter, which is a LinkedIn newsletter and like a real newsletter, quote unquote, off-platform newsletter as well. But if you're already on LinkedIn following me, just go ahead and check out that newsletter on LinkedIn and get all those information every Wednesday morning.
Perfect. Listeners will have those links in the show notes, if I could speak correctly. If you like what you heard, please rate the podcast, share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. If you don't like what you heard, hit the little message button, shoot us a message, and tell us what you'd like to hear, and I'll get rid of Jake. Until next time, ta-ta for now.